What would I say if I could go back in time? And I am now 50 years old. I'm Dr. Leif Smith. I'm 50 years old. What would I say if I could go back in time and sit down and have a coffee with my 30-year-old self? Well, why not make a video about it and post it on YouTube? So first off, I think there's a lot of pressure on 20 to 29-year-olds to figure out life, to get it together, to know what you're doing, to form a career, right? To create a career. And I think a lot of that pressure is undue pressure. I think it's crazy. If you look at life expectancy today, those of you that are in your 20s headed to 30 are probably, and I will say that confidently, probably going to live to the age of 100, given the medical advances that we're experiencing on a daily basis almost. You can confidently believe that you're going to live to the age of 100. Now, whether you live in a healthy way is a whole nother video. But that being said, there's a lot of pressure on you guys from the world in general to become something and to have it all figured out by the time you're 30. I remember feeling that pressure. That was over 20 years ago. But I remember feeling it too, and I can sense it now in my daily practice as a psychologist, working with people in their 20s, headed to 30. I see it. And so I want to talk about that, and I want to help you take the pressure off by just letting you in on a little bit in terms of what I would say and how I would talk to myself and what would be the best advice that I could give my 30-year-old self. So let's just dig in. Most of you know my story, and if you don't, I'll let you in a little bit about who I am and why I'm here. So, I got my doctorate in clinical psychology and I graduated at the age of 30 officially with my doctorate in clinical psychology. I originally set out to get it by age 28. However, you know what happens, the best laid plans, right? That didn't happen. It took me a while to finish up my dissertation, which was a difficult dissertation to do because I was doing it on working with athletes and married athletes. And so by the time I was 30, I finally graduated. And when I was 30, I had already now been married 7 years because I got married young. I got married at the age of 23, which for most of you guys watching this, if you're in your 20s, that probably feels young. It didn't feel young to me because of the way I had grown up. I grew up with a lot of trauma. I grew up with a lot of chaos. I lived in 8 houses before the age of 18. 8 different houses, and most of those were forced moves. So in other words, we lost the house, we were evicted, we were kicked out. So a lot of moving, a lot of instability in my life. I was one of 12 kids. When I was in high school, I was the oldest of 9 kids at home in the house when I was in high school. So a lot of stuff going on. Parents divorced after having all of those kids. You have a flock of kids and then you get divorced. And so that occurred for me in my life when I was 14. And it was a lot of stress. And so growing up with a lot of stress, you seek stability. And so my first real serious relationship after college, it started in late college, I got married. And so I got married at 23. And then I went off to grad school. I started grad school at 25. 24, I started grad school. And off I went into the big bad world. Got my doctorate by age 30. Did a postdoctorate fellowship program at The Ohio State University. Eventually started a private practice. And here I am. 20 years later after graduating with my doctorate, here I am talking to you on YouTube. My first piece of advice to my 30-year-old self would be to get my mind around the fact that I'm gonna live to be 100. Now, this might not seem that important, but it's a big important part of being wise. If you're only planning to live to the age of 76, for example, your life is much different at 30 than if you're planning to live 100 and beyond. I remember growing up with all that trauma and all the chaos and everything that was going on in my life. I remember not having a plan for life after the age of 22. I know that sounds weird, but I didn't know if I would live that long. Growing up, I had severe asthma, And I was actually put on life support twice. Twice within a 3-year span in high school. And so I've beaten the odds. Here I am. I'm not supposed to be here after having been on life support for asthma. And here I am. So at age 21, I really didn't have any plans beyond that year. And so I had to start figuring it out. Well, I would like to go back and talk to myself and say, listen, it's okay. You're probably going to live to be 100. So you got plenty of time left to plan things. You don't have to figure it out right away. That's the same advice I'm going to give to you. If you are in your 20s, don't worry about it when people are telling you, you have to figure this out. You have to get a job. No, you don't. What you have to figure out is, I'm going to live to be probably 100, so that gives me approximately 75, 80 years of life left over. So I have 3/4 of my life still to live. And so there is no pressure there to figure everything out now. My 30-year-old self, I remember when I hit 30, I remember that year when I hit 30 and I felt like, oh, geez, I got to be an adult now. I had a mortgage. At that point, I had one kid and another kid on the way. So I was married with a mortgage, making very little money. I think I made almost below poverty level those first couple years after getting my doctorate. So, woohoo! If you're getting into psychology, you have a lot to look forward to. But I wish someone would have sat me down and said, chill out, dude. You got a lot of time left. Your job right now is to get your mind around that and to take the long view on your life. The second thing I would tell myself, if I were talking to my 30-year-old self, would be the most important thing you can do right now, career-wise, is to figure out what you would sacrifice for. Your job is, as a career, is to find a job, a vocation, something you are good at, something you are valuable to the world in doing. So your job in your 20s is to figure out, what am I good at? What does the world need? And how can I use my skills to meet that need? Very important. That's what you have to do for a career in your 20s. By the time you're 30, if you can be well on your way to doing that, good for you. You've got it figured out. What I see now is a lot of people in their 20s, they're in college. Why are they in college? Because that's what they're supposed to do. That's what their parents told them to do. That's what their parents did, right? So you go to college and you go get your communications degree or your English degree or your history degree, and then you graduate, and then now you have to try to figure out, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I have a history degree, but I don't want to teach. So what am I going to do with that? So I see that a lot. What I would like to see you do is really put some contemplative time in, put the time and the energy into figuring out, what am I good at? What do I love to do? When I figured out that I wanted to be a psychologist, here's how I did it. I was pre-med when I went to undergraduate at Iowa. Okay, so I was a pre-med biology major for 3 years, and I struggled and I struggled and I struggled in all the chemistry classes. It was so difficult. I was like that. It was like that scene in Tommy Boy when he gets a D plus and he's excited and he hugs that random student, right? That was me as a biology major because it was so difficult with those chemistry classes. I would study really hard and it just didn't click in my head during the tests for whatever reason. Then I signed up to take elementary psychology, and that was a class of about 300 students, and I think I ended up top 10 in that class. And I went back and looked at the book, and I had written notes all over it. I had highlighted more than any other book I'd ever read as a college student, and I had fun. And on top of it, it was easy, and I was a curve wrecker for that course. My fellow classmates didn't think it was so easy. To me, it was extremely easy, and it was fun, and I actually did not want to sell my book back. That's when it clicked for me, and I realized, I'm good at this. I'm good at thinking about people and why they do what they do, and how they can change, and why they change. That's when it started to click for me. So at that point, I switched my major from biology to psychology, and I was a junior. No problem, right? I know. You're saying, my parents would kill me if that happened. No, because I had figured out what I'm good at. And now I can be a doctor of a different sort. So I can be a doctor of the head. I can be a clinical psychologist. And so at that point, I realized I'm going to get a certain set of skills, and I can go forth into the world and start helping people so that they're not always suffering, so that they don't have to go through the trials and tribulations I went through growing up. I can use my experience, bring that to bear on top of the theory and on top of the research that I'll be studying in grad school. So when I figured that out, everything got so much easier because I was combining what I'm good at, what the world needs, in a one package. And when you do that, you are valuable to the world. You will always have a job. My work is recession proof. Okay? It is recession proof. People will always need someone to help them, to listen, to help guide them. That's my job. And so the best thing you can do is figure out, what are you good at? What does the world need? And how can you combine what you're good at to meet the needs of the world in general? The next thing I would tell myself while we're downing coffee, right, together, my 50-year-old self and my 30-year-old self, is be very vigilant about the important aspects in your life. That would be your relationships. That would be your finances. That would be parenting if you have kids yet, right? That would be your vocation, the skills, right? It'd also be your hobbies, your health. These are areas that you want to start getting vigilant about when you're in your 30s. Why? Because you get old quick if you don't do that. One of the things that I did wrong, if I'm looking at my life, is I was 30, starting a career, which is very stressful, starting postdoctorate career. I now have, by age 31, I had two small kids under the age of 3, married, and I stopped exercising. I stopped working out because I was so overwhelmed. Go to work, come home, take care of kids. Go to work, come home, take care of kids. And my job at that time was working with the athletes at a big university, the biggest university in the U.S., actually, the Ohio State University. And so I was traveling with the teams there, the sports teams in the athletic department, working with 1,100 athletes there. It gets overwhelming. So I wasn't vigilant about my health. I gained a lot of weight. I think I gained 10, 15 pounds in that time period. I stopped working out. As an ex-athlete, I went from playing basketball and working out and lifting and doing stuff on a daily basis to nothing. Sitting, listening to people all day, and then going home and sitting and changing poopy diapers and things like that. So I wasn't vigilant about my health, and I didn't eat well. And when you're stressed, you don't eat well. So that was important. So I remember it came to a head one day when, in my mid to late 30s, one of my buddies asked me to go play on a sand volleyball team with him. And I went out there to play, and I didn't warm up because I didn't warm up when I was young. I didn't do that either. So I didn't need to, right? As a former athlete, you don't need to warm up. Well, now I'm 30, early 30s. I went out there, I think the first couple plays, I went for a dig, and I pulled my quad muscle. I thought I had ripped it off the bone. It hurt so bad. And I was out for an extended period of time after that, right? I made a good impression on those guys, those strangers that I was playing sand volleyball with, right? Let's bring the new guy in, and immediately he goes for a dig, and you have to carry him off the court because he's in so much pain. Yeah, wake up call. I hadn't been taking care of my health, and you need to start taking care of your health at 30. Even if you're going to live to be 100, you need to start laying the foundation, good habits, good supplementation, working out, lifting weights. You need aerobic, you need anaerobic, these sort of things. I would also talk to myself about finances and say, listen, you need to start planning for living to a life of 100. Your money is going to need to last you that long, and you are starting your prime earning years. For me, the prime earning years are from about 30 to about 55 years old. That's when you're going to earn and be the most valuable for yourself. So Those years are important, and so you want to plan them out. One of my pieces of advice would be make sure you're working for yourself. Why? Because later on, if you're not working for yourself, you can be downsized, you can be outsized, you can be fired if you are an employee and you're working for someone else. Put some time and effort into thinking, how can I bring my skills to bear for myself and for others, but I can work for myself. And that's very important thing in your 30s. I would also talk about the importance of staying connected with friends. I lost touch with a lot of friends in my 20s and heading to 30. I lost touch with a lot of friends because you're all out building families, getting married, moving around the country, doing things. And when you're disconnected like that, it's really easy to get depressed. Okay? So this is a very important part of your mid to late 20s, is turning your skills into a career and understanding all the little things that are going to be important later on, like health, relationships, friendships, social life, hobbies. Understanding that you're laying the groundwork. Once you hit 30, you're laying the groundwork for the rest of your life doing that. That's very important. And so those would be the first 3 things I would talk to my 30-year-old self about. If you're 30, if you're 40, if you're 50, and you're watching this video, what would you have told yourself at 30? I'm interested in that. I really am. What would you have told yourself? What would be the most valuable piece of advice? I've just listed 3, but you might have a better idea on a piece of advice that would be helpful also. So, if you are headed towards 30, I hope this was helpful. If it is, leave a comment below, and welcome to my community. It's ever growing, and I love to have people joining on a daily basis, and I love to have you as a part of my community. So I will see you in the next video.